Good afternoon, everyone. We will be starting shortly. Let's just give everybody 5 minutes to join in. Thank you.
Hi.
Welcome, sir. Good afternoon. We'll just give everybody 2 more minutes to join in and then we'll begin.
Sure. I also have a presentation to share. Would it be possible to do that?
Yes, absolutely. Our team can help you out with that. We'll just give you host permissions and then that should be all.
Perfect.
I request the IT internal to please make sure sir is able to share his presentation.
Right has been given.
All right. Let me see. Yeah. Dropbox. Oops. Share my screen. So can you see my screen now?
Yes, your screen is visible.
Oh, great.
All right. We'll just start and I'll introduce everyone and then we can get right into this. So once again, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the second webinar in the series of webinar on clean technology, innovation, the new India needs. I'm Sushruti Tripathi. I'm an assistant manager with Agni, which stands for Accelerating Growth of New India's Innovations. And we are partnering with Magic by CMIA Aurangabad and Tata Technologies on their Tata Magic Innovation Hub platform to bring you this webinar series. It's part of CII's Icon 21 portal, and we have participants joining us in three manners. So there are participants on the portal watching this, there are those who've joined us on the link itself, and this is being live streamed on YouTube. So I welcome everyone from wherever you're joining in to the session again. Before I introduce this speaker for today, I would just like to invite Mr. Ashish Karde, the director of Magic, to open with welcome remarks and introduce our partners for the event. Ashish ji, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Sushruti. It's immense pleasure to welcome all the participants for this seminar. It has been indeed a successful journey where we have partnered with Agni, especially for theme-based webinars as part of the Tata Technology Magic Innovation Hub, which is hosted on CII platform as part of the Icon 21 virtual exhibition. We have partnered with Pimpri Chinchwad College of Engineering for this particular session, and I am sure today's session would be of immense value to all the participants who have joined in. We also have a couple of incubatees connected with Magic who are also on this call, who are working in the same domain. And I'm sure today's presentation would also give new direction to their future journey. I hope with these introductory remarks, we can proceed further, and I hand over the proceedings to Shruti.
Thank you, Ashish ji. And I would just like to give a little background on Agni for those of our participants who are new here to the series of webinars. Agni is a program of the Office of the Principal Scientific Advisor to the Government of India. And we are a mission under the Prime Minister's Science, Technology and Innovation Advisory Council. Agni is executed at Invest India, which is India's national investment promotion agency. Our main aim is to help commercialize Indian technological innovation, and we convene the finest technologists and their deployment-ready technologies from startups to R&D laboratories with the top technology users from Indian and global enterprise, government, and the non-profit sector. Having said that, it is my pleasure to introduce today the speaker for our session, Mr. Karthik Chandrasekhar. He's a partner of Sangam Ventures, which I don't think needs any introduction to all our partners, but is an early stage fund focused on fighting climate change and driving resource productivity. Recording May I request everybody else to please, for the time being, mute their mics. Thank you. Mr. Chandrasekhar is also the chairman of AIC Sangam Innovation Foundation, India's first dedicated CleanTech incubator set up in partnership with the Government of India's Niti Aayog. He holds an MBA from Chicago Booth, an MS in Public Policy from Carnegie Mellon, and a BTech from IIT Bombay. It is my pleasure, sir, to hand over the floor to you for the discussion, and then we will take on questions from the audience. Thank you. So you're on mute.
I'm just setting myself up so that I can see you for the few who are kindly on video, and I'll share my screen separately on the separate link that I've joined in. Let me do that. Brilliant. Right. Hello, everyone. So I think before I join, I think this is supposed to be a conversation, not so much kind of me presenting to you. So I would love to kind of check in as well from any of you, or feel free to stop me at any point if you want to have a discussion on anything I'm talking about. But yeah, before I start, maybe I'd love to get any questions that might be there in the audience. All right, so I guess we will get to them as they come up. So maybe what I'll do is I'll just give a very quick introduction about Sangam, give a bit of a sense around the thesis and the thought process with which we invest, and also then get into what we feel makes climate change interesting, investing like really interesting, but also kind of entrepreneurship, give an opportunity for creating value, right? And so with that, I'll just kind of, so Sangam, as the name suggests, the idea was to create a fund which brought together investors, providers of capital, entrepreneurs, providers of innovation, and the idea around creativity and collaboration to transform us as a society to be living in more harmony with nature. So basically bringing everybody together to solve for mainly the climate change problem that we are facing today. And so why, right? I think we kind of started, looking at climate change as something that most people, I would say till last year or 2 years back, did not really think is is a problem to be addressed just yet, but also quite a few who still kind of expect this sector to go through its ups and downs in terms of cyclicality, right? So we have had booms and busts in the climate change space, and everybody expects that. But for most part, I think when you look at climate change, we've kind of gotten ourselves into a bit of a pickle, right? So we kind of had really amazing weather, atmospheric conditions, which allowed us to kind of grow and boom as a species on the planet. And then we discovered coal, and then we discovered oil, and then now we've basically gotten ourselves into a point where the planet, if we don't do something about it, will become uninhabitable for not just us, but every other species, right? So, and then that curve needs to turn, and it needs to turn really, really fast, right? And frankly, all that, development gave us like an amazing quality of life, right? So, we enjoy the benefits of the developments that have happened over the past few centuries across the board, but not for everyone, right? So I think for us, it's important to kind of think about that inclusive nature of climate innovation that needs to happen. And for most part, what got us into this mess is innovation and economic activity, right? And a lot of it was basically driven by this extractive nature of industry, which kind of had a lot of carbon emissions, and this sense around that resources are infinite, or we can keep extracting as much as we want. And to us, what we think will get us out of this mess is actually the same thing, right? Human innovation and economic activity is what needs to help us get us out of this mess. The only difference being that we need to kind of transition to a more cleaner energy scenario, as well as kind of look at more circular and regenerative ways to basically run the economy, whether it's materials or food or anything else, right? And so if you look at those three parts, right? So kind of the energy transition, the circular economy bit, and then kind of looking at food and agriculture, or how we feed ourselves. On the energy transition side, it's almost a 3 key step process, and then there's a few incremental ones for the hard to solve problems, right? So the first part is we need to kind of move away from fossil fuels and move into renewables in any shape or form. Solar is the predominant kind of technology today, but anything else that you can use, whether it's geothermal energy or wind or biomass or any of those, shifting across is going to be important. And then as you shift across to renewables, you also need to kind of make sure that you use as little energy as possible. So kind of driving more energy efficiency. And that covers about half the energy optimization that we need to do in terms of the energy transition. And once you have that, shifting as much as possible to being more electricity based is going to be extremely critical. So then everything shifts to renewable, efficient, electricity based economy. And then the last bits that are the hardest ones, we look at like alternative fuels, hydrogen, and a bunch of other technologies to kind of get us across. Right? So that's kind of high level, the thought process. So when people are thinking about EVs, people are thinking about anything within the energy space, that's basically the energy transition thought process, right? Part of that obviously is also kind of thinking about energy access and making sure that we have universal access to basic energy for everyone. Now, on the energy side, I've just put up a few examples. We've predominantly been an energy investor, and then we've kind of looked at the other sectors as well. A lot of energy transition will require energy storage, right? So if you're doing renewables, you're doing intermittent energy supply, you need to kind of bring up a lot of storage technology to go along with the renewables. The other bit that needs to come up is basically energy efficiency, as I talked about. So a lot of it around either improving the energy efficiency in buildings or basically kind of switching over from fossil fuel based transportation to basically electrical transportation. And even within that, there is obviously like the two-wheelers and three-wheelers that we see most often, and we're seeing a lot of activity in the energy EV space, but like, a lot of that transport pollution comes from heavy electric vehicles, the buses, the trucks, the freight, part of it. So, kind of working on that becomes very critical. And then the last bit is actually the transforming how we basically make and use goods. And a lot of that is to do with one, shifting to reusing as much as possible. And that's going to be a critical part of the iron, the aluminum, the plastics and paper and other sectors, but also kind of looking for like low carbon alternatives for, say, cement or steel or any of those kind of opportunities, right? And as much as possible, if you're reducing waste, and then looking for any other models by which we prolong the life of anything that we use, that's going to basically kind of get us to a more and more circular, zero waste kind of economy. And I think that's the push that's going to be very critical, because quite a bit of GHG emissions are actually linked to all the stuff that we consume, right? So for most part, most of the planet has gotten to a point where we are a consumer-driven economy. So I think working on that aspect of like making consumers make more sustainable choices is going to be very critical, right? And a great example of that in the portfolio is a biogas company that's basically taking most of the food waste and organic waste from cities and putting it in biogas plants and basically taking it back to the same city and like fueling either restaurants, hotels, industry within that same ecosystem. Right. The last bit, and I think the most important one when it comes to a country like India, which is mostly agrarian, is to kind of make sure that we kind of work around improving land-based soil carbon. And quite a bit of that is a very critical thing to do in India, where quite a bit of the land is degraded. We have severe freshwater, groundwater issues across quite a bit of the country. And then, we need to also kind of think about food from a nutrition perspective, and then looking at, doing more in terms of supporting more local community-based food systems, as well as kind of looking at more kind of regenerative agriculture, where we are using less and less chemical inputs in our farming ecosystem. And so examples of that are basically kind of small pumps, which basically don't take away too much of water from the soil and kind of helps the farmers be more efficient in their water use, or looking at like companies that can help farmers adopt more regenerative practices in their farming and make sure that that benefit of that is basically kind of recognized by the consumers. And so I think now to the part where we always kind of struggle as climate change entrepreneurs and investors, right? A lot of what we work on are central to our modern way of life, right? Whether it's water, built environments, air conditioning, agriculture, electricity. A lot of it is like central to what we think is our way of life. If we don't have it, then things will just kind of fall apart. But there is not enough of investor interest or entrepreneurial support systems built around this, right? And the question is why? And why is this so hard? And to us, we feel that when it comes to governments, comes to individuals, you're always kind of going through this juggle of rock, paper, scissors, where you first kind of trying to make sure you can survive. So you're kind of getting the basics available to you. So you're looking at like roti, kapda, makan. And then once you have that, you want to kind of get into more progress, economic development, and then kind of improve your quality of life. And once you kind of have a meaningful quality of life, you want to kind of think about sustainability and whether you're consuming in a sustainable way. But as you get to that point, you want to kind of also make sure that there is inclusiveness in and justice in kind of how the overall society happens, right? So you kind of always have to juggle this, especially as individuals and as governments. And I think the ecosystem, because it's all about public goods as well, and infrastructure doesn't kind of work well to support climate change entrepreneurship. And while there is opportunity and individuals will support you and governments will support you, they are not the ones who are going to lead, right? So what you want are entrepreneurs who kind of take up these challenges and are able to kind of manage for these different, competing needs and wants, and be able to kind of get governments and individuals to come and work with them. And so, as I started, we are in a bit of a pickle. What we are expecting is something that's extremely ambitious to happen within the next decade or two. And so why are we kind of this optimistic, right? So we really think that while resources are limited, human ingenuity is an unlimited resource. We really need to figure out from a science, from an engineering perspective, how do you basically fix for all the problems that we have created, right? And so when you look at climate change investing, quite a bit of it is like very hard engineering innovation, which I would kind of call deep tech, not so much just the software side of things, but like building things, creating things. But also a lot of these immediately become provisions for long-term services, long-term infrastructure, and play quite a bit in commodity markets, right? None of these are things that investors or venture capital investors or startup support investors like. So what we need to do is to kind of figure out a way to break away from some of these issues that always kind of seem to plague climate change innovations, right? So within that, we think, we need to fix climate change investing. So I've put down, and these are just the one part of, on the entrepreneurial side, things that we could do to fix and improve the climate change ecosystem. And I'll go through these one by one, right? So first and foremost is, if you are a climate change investor, as much as possible, look for startups, or if you're a startup, look for customers and focus on the customers and try and figure out getting to this concept of product market fit, which is saying, will you find a customer who will pay you for your service? And at that point, you might be able to make some economic value for yourself and basically make your customers happy. If you can find that, then growing your business, building your business is a lot more easier, because your customers drive the value of the business, and you need to kind of find businesses, especially the climate change side, where there are a lot of customers with that need or problem to be solved. Two, I think we have seen this time and again with a lot of clean tech innovation entrepreneurs and investors. You really need to understand financing, right? Even at the early stage, you need to think through how are you going to set up your startup for capital efficiency, and how you can use capital to scale fast. And I think that becomes a very critical aspect of on venture building, where you're competing with so many startups, which are basically competing for the investor capital that you are trying to access as well. And I can go into depth into in any of these, right? Two, or number three now is, if you are basically working with a commodity style business, pass through all the risk, or pass through as much of the risk as you can, right? So if you're doing recycling, if you're basically building a product which is mostly commodity, try and figure out if you can basically kind of do contracts where you pass through the risk and you only kind of do business where you're kind of getting paid for the value addition that you do in that value chain, right? Don't kind of hold on to any stock, or don't kind of try and play for volatility in the market. And I think that becomes very critical to ensure in the early days, at least, that you can basically grow quickly. This is another bit that we have again seen that a lot of climate change entrepreneurs struggle with. Most are engineers, most are building technology solutions, but they don't leverage digital technologies enough. We kind of live in a connected, automated world. And I think that's a big opportunity to be able to showcase your impact, connect with your customers, build network effects to scale your startup. And I think leveraging digital as an opportunity for you to scale up is very important in today's ecosystem, right? So those are the key ones for entrepreneurs and investors to focus on. For us, the fix number 2 was we see a lot of activity in areas that seem most convenient. For us, we kind of do a lot of thesis work, so spend a lot of time understanding sectors, and then we go and work where we see are the hard challenges, rather than basically going and sitting under a street light conveniently looking for something that we have lost, right? So just find a problem that's interesting, stay with the problem and kind of fix the problem, rather than kind of just looking for something convenient to solve. And then 3, I think what you're doing in the ecosystem, which is extremely important, is basically making climate change entrepreneurship attractive, right? Can we build role models? Can we attract more talent into the sector? Maybe create some recognition, bring in creativity, make sure that these are, organizations, companies that people, youth would want to come and work with, right? And bring more talent into the sector. I think that's a very critical part of any sector growing, is the quality and the number of talent that it's able to attract. And I think that's a very critical aspect that we want to do. So grow the talent pool, right? So find smart people and convince them to join your cause. I think the more we can do that, the better off we are. I think that's the last of my slides. So, for most part, I think as entrepreneurs and investors, I do recommend you kind of learn and apply again. And so we've done this repeatedly. We have failed in some of our investments, and we have learned from those, and then kind of went in and invested in the same sector, in the same kind of business, but with a different approach based on our learnings, right? So I think it's important to kind of learn from your investments and do it. And then basically for you to learn, you need to be able to measure and iterate, and that goes along with the strategy of thinking about collecting data and thinking about, kind of digital strategies in your investing and in your startups. I think that is the last bit, right? So I think the key to how these sectors operate, and if you look at like EVs today, everybody, I think somewhere around last year, everybody decided that EVs are coming, and in 10 years time, everybody is going to switch over to an EV, right? So that's kind of when investors start betting into multiple companies which are doing the same thing, because they think the market is going to be big enough. There's going to be an opportunity if you start early to build some leaders. And so that inevitability is something that you want to recognize and be able to kind of then define your play in the market, independent of whether you're an entrepreneur or an investor. So looking out for what's looking inevitable, and also kind of thinking about what you think might be inevitable and then kind of playing into it, are the big ways for you to kind of build big entrepreneurial successes. I think that's Do you still have me? Sorry, so I just lost power, but I am off my Wi-Fi. I think the other one will come back on. So I think the last bit is around when you're doing, especially clean tech entrepreneurship, focus on building startups that can compete globally, because a lot of clean tech, given its nature, is a global market, and there are opportunities where you can understand nuances of the local ecosystem and build startups that may cater to the local ecosystem, but you want to have startups that can compete at a global scale, and be able to kind of build something that's meaningful, not just in India, but maybe other emerging markets, but also be able to go compete in like China or the US, right? So I'll stop there and I'll drop the slides. I'm happy to take questions or have a conversation.
So any of our participants are free to ask a question either on chat or unmute themselves and go into the conversation.
Sir, hi. My name is Sushant.
Hi, Sushant. Go ahead.
Sir, I'm in the field of hospitality. Okay, where I promote the hotels and the airline also. And I do B2B with the travel agencies I deal with. So in our case, how much the clean tech helps in taking the, because I do not have any product of mine. It's a service that I provide. It's a business management firm where we provide hospitality services.
Sure. So I think even any business today, right? If you are not providing a clean technology service, then you have a big opportunity to adopt clean technology services, and you have a big opportunity to use that to create, customer awareness around sustainability, customer awareness around, kind of what a good hospitality chain would look like. And that could include everything from managing your waste, managing, what kind of fuel you use in your kitchen. It could also be about like, telling your, and some of these are like simple examples, right? Telling your customers to not throw the towels for wash if they want to, and like putting it away, and so you don't have to kind of have a bigger laundry bill, but also kind of be more sustainable, right? And there are so many options where customers actually learn about sustainable products because they are traveling and see it in sustainable hotel chains, right? And that might also endear them to you. So happy to kind of connect you to some of these organizations that are providing sustainable solutions as well. And a lot of them are in your neck of the woods as well.
Thank you very much, sir. Thanks for the advice.
Thanks for the question, Sushant.
Pleasure, sir.
We have another question in the chat box as well from Prashant Gupte from Thane, Maharashtra. And he's working on a project which is a garbage destroying unit, and it is a society level project. So he's mentioned no segregation, collection, transportation, or dumping ground required. And it's a society level project looking for funding for the prototype model. So how can one go ahead with securing funding for a prototype model in the clean tech sector, I think is the question he wants to ask.
Yeah, I wish you had reached out a few weeks earlier, but there are always ongoing programs. So maybe I can connect you to some of the other organizations doing some of this work. But one big one was the ACT Grants Clean Air Challenge, where they're giving grants for startups to test out new solutions which will reduce like GHG emissions, pollution, and your technology seems very close to providing that as a value, right? So kind of keep a lookout for urban planning, smart city projects. Keep a lookout for opportunities within, say, waste management ecosystems, as well as kind of air pollution or climate change ecosystems. There are a lot of programs running which have opportunities to win grants. Obviously, local incubators also have an opportunity to provide you with grants. But then last but not the least, there is, if you search online for City Innovation Exchange, that's basically a program, I think, which is coming through Agni, or at least the Principal Scientific Advisor's Office. And there you will actually see cities who are open to kind of speaking with entrepreneurs and providing opportunities for them to pilot technologies like yours.
Definitely. And please do feel free to reach out to us at Agni as well. And we'd be happy to help in whichever way we can to connect you to perhaps the right stakeholders and partners. If there are any other questions from other audience members.
I have one more question, if you don't mind. What is a community ecosystem? What is that basically, sir?
So a community ecosystem could be anything where the local citizens participate, right? So I can give you an example where a company called Carbon Masters that I have showcased on the slides, in the Bangalore municipality, and similar to what the gentleman had asked in terms of that waste incineration project, they work with the RWA, specific association of RWAs, to take waste from them, make biogas right there in the community itself, and pipe it to 2 restaurants right there in the community itself. So it doesn't leave the community. And that is championed by the RWA, because then the citizens are basically going around making sure that the waste is segregated and provided in the right way. Right? So then your community is your champions. And I think more and more of that needs to happen for us to be successful in tackling climate change.
Yes.
And that could include for food, it could be for how you source, for your hotels or restaurants, all of that. Right?
Yes. Thank you, sir.
There is another question in the chat from Sandesh Singh. How should I start a new venture in clean tech, and are there any concepts around it? I know this is, I think, a particularly broad question, but if you would like to take that.
So I think you want to start something in which you have ideally a background, and frankly, clean tech itself is a pretty broad space, right? So everything from energy, waste management, water, agriculture, all of it comes under climate change kind of scenarios. The key is basically kind of thinking about it from a sustainability science perspective. So you need to kind of understand the, are you making an impact on climate change, or are you kind of, doing something that might be harming the planet, right? So making sure you understand that is very critical. But I think the most important thing for climate change investors is to understand the nuances of what makes climate change good or hard. But otherwise, climate change entrepreneurship is the same as any other entrepreneurship. You need to focus on customers, sales, and cash. If you focus on those, you're going to be fine. So pick something that you're passionate about, that you would want to work with those kind of customers, and start, with few sales and then building it out from there.
And following from what you said, sir, about making sure that what you're doing is actually in its end result sustainable, I had a question myself, which was that there is a, a serious need for combining research and development with whatever product you provide in the clean tech sector, particularly because there are so many innovations that end up in the long term, perhaps solving one problem but creating another. For example, if everybody transitions to EV, but the charging stations are still powered by fossil fuel, then that sort of leads us into a different situation, which does not completely solve the purpose we set out to solve. So, in that respect, for a new entrepreneur who has perhaps a product idea and a problem market fit, how can they best go about finding the right research people or the science to back up what they think could be a potential solution? So, how do they make that fit if they themselves are not from a scientific background?
Oh, that's a great question, and I wish I had a very clear answer to that. So we run a climate change incubator. We know other organizations like Social Alpha who run climate change incubators. There are a few others as well in the ecosystem that do climate change work. And then you have like some of the university lab and other CSIR kind of laboratories that includes NCL in Pune, or like somebody like IIT Bombay or UBCT, depending on what technology you have. I think the most important thing you can do as an entrepreneur is to go and ask. And I think that should have been one thing that I will add to my slide. But if you don't know, ask. And if you are currently in that scenario, please send it to me, and we will find you somebody who can give you that feedback, right? So I think the most important thing you can do is ask, and you will find somebody within that ecosystem, and be very shameless about saying, hey, I'm an entrepreneur, I can't pay for it, but I would like at least a basic level of like analysis to be done around the sustainability of my product or solution, and that'll be somebody who will help you with that. And there are quite a few universities, professors who are interested in working with startups, especially in that domain.
Thank you. That is indeed a very heartening answer to know that the community sort of supports it. There are other questions in the chat that I'll then quickly move to. We have a question from Shruti Singh, and she wants to know what kind of parameters do investors look at with respect to early stage deep tech biomanufacturing startups, so POC development stage.
Again, right, so if you are in an R&D proof of concept stage, what we would like to see as an investor is the conversation you've had with potential customers for your technology, right? Are you building something which is solving a problem for somebody who is willing to pay for it? If you have that, then you're good. It doesn't matter if you have small profit margins, big profit margins. What is important is that you have a good customer feedback saying, yes, we are willing to pay for it. And that market of people who are willing to pay for it is a meaningful size for you to be able to build a business. Right? So I think that's the main bit, right? So if you are kind of today somebody building a POC in a lab or in an R&D ecosystem, I would take that thought process and actually go out and talk to potential people in the industry. So you could kind of use, I think there's a question before, like how can CII help startups? You can actually use the CII ecosystem to find potential customers to work with, right? And then kind of get feedback from them on whether this makes sense, whether the price point makes sense, whether the characteristics of the product that you're building make sense, or what's the most important one, right? So there's always that 80-20 rule in like product development where 20% of what you're building is going to create 80% of the value, and you want to kind of focus on that, right? So getting that feedback will help you also reduce your product development timelines.
Thank you. And another question is on carbon credits, which I personally also find very interesting, is What is the thought around earning of carbon credits by individuals while attending virtual meetings or workshops instead of physically attending events? I'm going to turn this around into another question about carbon credits as well. I know the market perhaps is not that as in developed in India right now. But what are sort of the trends for carbon credit financing, perhaps for entrepreneurs whose solutions actually either sequester carbon or contribute to the environment through GHG emission reductions?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? So, your question, the one around virtual meetings, I think we'll have to make people pay extra when they want to do in-person meetings to cover for the carbon cost of doing that. But coming back to carbon credits as they link to entrepreneurship, innovation, clean technology ecosystems, I think the big thing that's happening in the overall fintech space, right? Fintech is getting to a point where quite a bit of financing and the financial ecosystem is shifting to software and being online, being able to kind of connect through edge devices, IoT technology to have like auditability in anything that you're doing, right? So you're doing customer loans, you're doing financing or payments or other kinds of transactions purely based on digital data that people are transacting with, right? And I think the technology is mature enough that if there is a technology solution brought forward for demonstrating your carbon mitigation in your project, you should be able to go out and earn carbon credits. And there will be people who will be open to doing it in an unorganized market as well. So you don't need to go to a carbon credit exchange, or you don't need to go through like reams of paperwork, which is the dominion of all people doing financing, right? You're going to get to a point where somebody's going to say, if you can show me digitally that you have saved carbon, I will pay you for it. And here is basically how, right? And that means if you build from day one in a digital ecosystem, which has auditability and transparency, there will be a day, and that's, I'm talking about in months or years, like a few years, that you will be able to kind of earn your carbon credits just by giving that data in an auditable way. That it's already happening in the developed economies.
Thank you, sir. Is there any other question that we have from audience members? And then I will take up the question. I will probably invite somebody from CII or TMIH to answer the question about how they're helping startups, ventures to secure funds to develop products or launch on the market. But we'll perhaps keep that question for the end of the session and just take any other clean tech questions addressed to Karthik sir right now. So if there's any other questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat or just unmute yourself and ask away. All right. I think there are no further questions then. For those of our participants who are watching us live, either on the CII platform or on YouTube live and are unable to put in their questions to us, I'm sure you can get in touch with us later, either through the portal or on email. And if there's anything or any question that we can help out with, we would love to. Sir, if there are any details, contact details that you would like to put in the chat for our participants, do let us know and we can put those up.
Yeah, you can share all my contact details. That's perfectly fine. And my email.
All right. So we'll just put your email in the chat box. And then if there are any questions that any of our participants want to address to sir, please feel free to do so. And I would like to say thank you for such an engaging discussion. I am a lawyer with a specialization in climate change by training. So this has been very, very interesting to me. I've learned quite a few things about entrepreneurship and climate change. And I'm sure our participants have greatly benefited from this as well. It was definitely refreshing to be able to have a conversation about entrepreneurship instead of just a sort of lecture or seminar. So thank you so much for this very interactive session, sir. And without further ado, I would like to also thank all our partner organizers, TMIH, Magic, Tata Technologies, and CII for making this possible. It's been a pleasure to be a part of this. And of course, thank you to the tech team who've been behind this and all our participants. We hope you all gained something from today's session. The recording of this will be available on YouTube as well, so you can spread the message for anybody that missed out on attending it. And with that, I would now hand over to Ashish Ji for some closing remarks. And thank you everyone for being here.
Thanks, Sushruti.
It was a pleasure. Ashish Ji, over to you. Or if Yogesh, you're here, then please.
Yes. Thank you, Sushruti. Thanks, Karthik sir, for giving such a great session. Thanks, Agni, for joining us and helping us to organize this session. Thank you, CII, Tata Technology, for partnering with us. So thank you all. Bye-bye. Take care.
And good luck in helping save the planet.